philosophy movement, as did Valentin Tomberg. Valentin Tomberg also belonged to the anthroposophy movement. But like Steiner, he too, they all just kind of they moved away from that. They sort of outgrew their organizations, and I think that really uh, is commendable of them, because the growing out of their organizations shows that they were on this edge. They were on the edge of development in the field of what they were, and that they were also accessing inspired resources, not necessarily that of just organizations.
I think the one thing that really jumps out at me is in the new book that I have. It's just one sentence from Beatty Griffin's, who Cynthia and Thomas and all of them just so highly respect. And he says, there's hardly a line without some profound significance. To me, this is the last word in wisdom. Wow. I thought, you got to pay attention if that's his one sentence that he could, to me, that he could say about the book.
So you managed to reach the afterword. Did you manage to crack the first Arcanum at all, Mark?
Yeah, I got through up to the appendix.
Okay, so but did you read The Magician? You read The Magician?
Yes, that's what I mean. I think that there was an
Up to the
appendix in
right.
The Magician.
That's right. There's these appendix to the letters. I keep forgetting about them.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting to hear, what do you make of this, and what in terms of other things. This is a different encounter. So what do you make of it so far? Putting you on the spot, Mark.
You are. It's a good question. I think that there's something in it that it's drawing me in ways that I didn't anticipate. I think that I've read through those first pages a couple of times, and I'm not sure what I expected from this book at all, but the approach seems to be more digestible than I anticipated. I think that the practical application to this image of this card, the Magician, spoke to me immediately. I think that the theoretical application that he's getting at is something that I would need to sit with longer, but just this idea that that work should be play. I found that when that's been my experience, that life is better. And I think just this idea that they're moving toward a space of ease and concentration, and that just a lightness in work is something that I need to receive. I work for a nonprofit here in Denver that builds community among homeless youth. And I know that I was a volunteer with this organization for a couple of years. I've been working with them full time for a little over 4 now. And I just feel that I'm at a space where I need some refreshment. I need to re-encounter work as play. I need to feel a lightness in the burdens of just the lives that I encounter and coming alongside. And so I think there's something here that is there's something for me here that I need to probably sit with for more than a couple of days.
Thank you.
You know, the key part to me of this is this idea of concentration without effort. So there is this volition, there is this action, concentration without effort. I just keep coming back to that thought. And he says, you know, operating with ease as if playing, Mark, what you're saying, as if playing and acting with perfect calm. What a combination. Perfect calm, concentration without effort, but operating with ease as if playing. And then I know, Alice, you have said, Alice has studied this the most, and we are dipping our toes in. It is not easy for me to read. I will just say it is not easy for me to read. I read it and reread it, and each sentence is so packed. But that this is the key. This is the key of the major arcana. This is important.
I love the phrase he uses, that this is the arcanum of intellectual geniality. That's a really good attitude to have in regard to this book, I think, to stay genial, which means to stay open as much as you can, to stay, you know, wow, that's something to ponder, but, you know, just be intellectually genial, because there's going to be a lot of synthesis that happens between your consciousness and your unconsciousness as you move through this book. And you have to trust that process. You're going to have to trust that process, because that's what symbols do. And the arcanum, each arcanum is they're powerful symbols. These symbols will be gradually unpacked through your psyche, and it won't happen all at once. So the attitude of just sort of staying, and you can see how dense the text is, to stay, to practice concentration without effort as you go through here, hopefully will allay some of your frustration. That's all I can say, because if you can just sort of say, okay, I'm not getting it all, I'm going to let some of this just wash over me. It's really important. He gives you some of those principles at the very beginning, because they'll help you to move forward, I think. The other really important, one of the really important principles in here that he introduces you to is the power of the principle of analogy. And as I read this again, I realized something. Analogy, you know, analogy can take you very far, because analogy connects you to, it brings in your living experience. If you understand an analogy, you're bringing in a principle and explaining it through an analog experience, experience that you have analogous to it. And often we use analogies when we're trying to explain something that's very difficult to explain. Now, analogies can also be trivial and lack depth. And he points this out, that it's a matter of the depth of experience when we're approaching the quality of an analogy. And with Yeshua, with Jesus, the reason that his parables were so powerful, I dare say, is because his experience was so deep, that when he gave you a parable, he would say, listen, if you have ears to hear this. And that meant if you had ears to take this analogy he was giving you and bring it deeper and bring it into your own experience, he's trying to help you do that. It's the way of teaching.
Wouldn't it be nice, though, if we were actually given a rule to distinguish between real analogies and bogus ones. For example, I could say Alice and I are both wearing a bluish sort of top, and that means you've got some sort of spiritual affinity, and you'd all say rubbish.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And this is where discernment comes in. But analogy is one of those keys to allowing concentration and thought to become playful. So I could play with that thought that you just threw out there, John.
Right.
I could play with that idea that you and I are both wearing like dark blue, and that that puts us into cosmic consciousness mode,
Yeah.
And maybe it does or maybe it doesn't, but the point is our clothing as an analogy. It makes it playful. Do you see? It brings it into the realm of playful fun, thinking playfully, rather than just abstractly all the time.
This chapter, this Arcanum, to me, at the beginning and just to boil it down, was meditation, concentration without effort. And he mentions meditation, but throughout the whole Arcanum, the whole letter, I'm thinking he's really focusing on meditation or contemplation, however you want to say it.
Those are different things, actually, honey.
Well,
yes, they are. Concentration, meditation, and contemplation are the three levels of Lectio Divina. They're actually three. They are three different things. They should not be conflated. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I think it's important to. They are and in the yogic terms, he uses them as dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. So
yeah.
Concentration is dharana, meditation is dhyana, and contemplation is samadhi.
Yeah. Well, samadhi is bliss, right?
There's different words for it, but contemplation is what brings you into a state of bliss.
Right.
It's just really important to, as we go through with Tomberg with this book, precision of terms, because a lot of times I think and so I didn't mean to be critical, but a lot of times we just kind of let concepts become sort of compartmentalized and contemplation and all that stuff that's kind of in the same box over here. But you have to he's trying to help you unpack those ideas. Because I read this again and realized this is the method of Lectio Divina. This is the method that we use for Lectio Visio Divina also, when we're looking at the images. The first round of Lectio, you're asked to concentrate on the text. You're asked to take it into your head. The second round of when you, or whatever, the next round of Lectio is designed to bring it into the meditative place, which is to bring it into the heart. And then from there, if you can, take it into contemplation. But this takes great practice. It's a tool.
Okay, so Alice, you're saying meditation, contemplation, and then
No, concentration.
Concentration's first.
meditation, concentration, and then what was the third one?
Concentration's first.
That's not what Alice said.
Yeah, concentration is the mental activity. When you look at this book and you read it, the first thing you do is concentrate on what the text is saying. But very importantly, it's important to meditate on it. That's why the book is called Meditations. It's very important to chew on these through your meditation. And eventually the act of contemplation, if you break the word down, means contempling. It means the temple. It means the temple of your consciousness. And so that means that you're bringing a teaching and whatever you're concentrating on into the fabric of your being, into your experience, where it can do its work. And this is the process: concentration, meditation, then contemplation. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Okay, thank you.
You know, I'm always talking about how we have to chew on these things. We have to chew like cud. We have to chew these texts. You can't just read them and go, okay, got it. And took some notes, and I could give you the cliff notes and we're good. Right. This book of all others is impossible. I look at this as a Bible, this book. And that is not a blasphemous statement to me. I look at it as a Bible because I do think that this text has a lot of revelation. I think a lot of it does come from inspired. I think that Tomberg truly meditated and brought from the imaginal realms, brought in deep wisdom. And so we need to approach it with utmost respect, as you would the Psalms, as you would reading the Old Testament or the New Testament. The same attitude of sort of the same attitude as you would approach any sacred text. I think that this, and as I can't say anything except that as you go along, that will prove me out. But the overriding fabric of this book is that it's written in medium of love, and it creates a warm light. And this is, you know, I've read a lot of other esoteric texts. Okay, I've read many, and the reason I come back to Tomberg, some of them are very mentally titillating. Some of them are, you know, you read things and go, well, those are very interesting ideas. And or they might flatter your ego. By the way, they could flatter your ego. To make you think that you're an initiate into great mysteries. All right. But he says here, the only initiator there is the great initiator. For any teacher, any human to tell you that they can initiate you and to get into the mystique of initiation, that is a dead end. And he points that out. I think, to me, this book has helped keep me grounded, and it's kept me humble, and it's kept me as the idea of servanthood is very strong here. Christian servanthood, it works very well for me, and that creates a warm light.
You know, on that note, what he defined for me, which struck me, was he talked about pure intellect is that which reflects, and love is that which acts.
Is that in the first Arcanum or the second one?
That's the first one. I think it may be around page 39, honey.
Okay, because I remember he re-talks about that in the second one also.
Yes, it's on page 39. And then he goes on to say that intellect is the feminine side of the soul.
Yeah.
So intellect is that which reflects. It's not us, it's not our thinking, it's reflecting. And it's the feminine side of the soul.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks.
Did you all encounter his distinguishing between the two churches of Peter and John?
Mm.
That's really an important piece here to keep in mind as we move forward. The exoteric and the esoteric church. John, did you make anything of that? Do you remember? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I do. And it's not very easy actually to say, or for me anyhow, to say, to make a hard and fast distinction between them, because while the exoteric church can sort of go off the rails very easily, as we know, certainly the only reason why I am here and can recognize some of the resonances, you know, that Tomberg is talking about is because I've been led to it in and through the exoteric church. And that is where God actually has touched me in various ways. On the other hand, I mean, the exoteric church can really behave incredibly stupidly and badly. I just wonder if the esoteric church would necessarily do any better, because it's interesting. You were talking about, Alice, when he says geniality is one of the features of the magician, but he immediately goes on to say, but that should not be confused with actually just letting anything go, because if you do that, that is a way of being a charlatan. And I quite see that if someone really does embody sacred wisdom, they will probably not go off the rails all that much. On the other hand, it is terribly easy for us to go off rails, and we think we are being holy, and when we're actually not being quite as holy as we thought there were. A lot of these arcana have got two sides to them. On the one hand, you have a picture of what this arcanum authentically represents, and on the other hand, you have a warning of what happens if you do not follow it appropriately, and instead of following God, you follow your own ego. But one thing I would like to share with you, which is vaguely relevant to what we have been talking about, on a blog the other day, I heard a really good advice, which says, don't follow the lantern, only follow the light. But that is a great deal easier said than done. And we are very often more comfortable with the things of God, with the lantern, rather than with the light of God itself. Thank you.
I asked this question of John, Mark. You may not know that, but John is a retired priest in the Episcopal Anglican Church in England. So it's interesting to hear his point of view as somebody who's been in the organized church for so many years and has found this avenue, which is a different path, and he's found it.
It's the same path, but a bit further on, perhaps. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Well, what he talks about in here is about the Church of St. Peter and St. John. The Church of St. John, which he's trying to describe, is the heartbeat of spirituality and Christianity. It's the heartbeat. That's why you don't have to be a Christian to follow this path. But it's John's role is to keep the living stream of the heart flowing through, to revivify, if you will, to revivify the church, the body of Christ, the beating heart of Christ, as opposed to Jesus's garments, if you will, as or limbs, as going by analogy. The beating heart of the church. I think, and the final thing that he says that I always love, he says, and that you know that this of the Church of Peter, or above all of the papacy, which is its visible symbol, and that the spirit of John, the disciple loved by the Master, he who leaned on his breast and heard the beating of his heart, will replace it. In this way, it teaches that the exoteric Church of Peter will make way for the esoteric Church of John, which will be that of perfect freedom. Perfect freedom. There's a lot packed into that sentence.
What page, Alice?
Well, I don't know if my edition is matching yours. Okay, so it's there's a quote That's a big long paragraph, blah, blah, blah. And then I have it on page 6, but I don't know if that's going to be your equivalent. It's going to be difficult to coordinate quotes with you.
Yeah.
I don't know if you see it there on page 6 or whether I should bring the other volume up here. I have both, so I could find it in both. It is after an italicized passage which says, what the Hermeticists possess is only the communal soul of religion, science, and art, which is in italics. I don't know if you see that. The communal soul of religion, science, and art.
That's page 6 for us.
Is
I
it?
remember reading it, yeah.
The
And
first
it's
full
below
paragraph.
that paragraph. It's right below that. He's referring to you, unknown friend. The doctrine of the so-called two churches, the Church of Peter and the Church of John, or of two epochs, the epoch of Peter and the epoch of John.
The mission of John is to keep.
This is an ongoing theme. It's an ongoing theme because he's talking about taking your spirituality from an outer authority, the outer authority of our religious life, and vivifying it and bringing it inward into the heart. And this is the path of the mystic. And this is the path that draws us. And it's always important to keep in mind this interplay between the two, the outer and the inner. I always call the Episcopal Church my storefront. It's the place out of which I operate. I don't necessarily feel like it's not where my heart is centered anymore, but it is in a very important structure from which I keep grounded. I stay grounded through the church. It keeps me grounded. It keeps me from flying off into an ivory tower or, it's our community, like working any community you work in with homeless or whatever you're doing. It becomes your storefront. It's your base of operations in the world. I mean, like, I don't need to go into the papacy and all that. I don't need to go into the difference between Catholic and Protestant. That's not what that's really like a irrelevant. The important thing to remember is talking about the outer authorities that we answer to and the inner authority that we will learn to trust, which gives us freedom. I'm sorry, honey, I cut you off. As I'm
That's fine.
Is anybody familiar with Hermes Trismegistus, who he refers to here? Are you? A little bit? The emerald tablets, those, all that stuff. This is stuff that I've gleaned over the years, The Corpus Hermeticum. The Corpus Hermeticum is a body of work that has come to us allegedly from a teacher named Hermes Trismegistus. Hermes, the thrice great, if that translates as, who was apparently a great sage, and may or may not be connected to the Book of Enoch, may or may not be connected to these ancient Egyptian initiates. But that might be something that feels kind of alien. Did you encounter, because he's trying to describe what the Hermetic path is. And you can't leave Hermes out. You can't leave Hermes out of this discussion. What did you think of that? Did you encounter, have you digested that yet?
My memory is trying to tell me, and it may well be wrong, that Hermeticism is a sort of amalgam of the Jewish Christian tradition on the one hand and sort of the Platonic tradition on the other. Does it have really much of an authentic Egyptian tradition as well?
That's what I'm saying. And that's what's being somewhat glossed over if you just talk about the other elements of influence, Kabbalah, and the Kabbalistic strain and the Platonic strain, which of course he'll go through all of those. But it's important to remember, and I have found it very useful to go back to the original text of the Corpus Hermeticum, because Hermes Trismegistus, the Emerald Tablet, you can find this on the internet, by the way, the Emerald Tablet of Thoth, which is apparently Hermes is his legacy. It's really hard to parse that text, and the translations are usually abysmal. But it's also one of those things where you could go and just taste it. Just go and taste it and see. Because, or maybe wait until you've gotten further into this book, but keep the Emerald Tablet in your mind, because it is a touch point. It's a source text that is to be unpacked. It's one of the great sources. The idea of the pack of the tarot deck is that it's this pack of symbols, and these symbols have, over the ages and many ages, they have achieved a richness. They have also been underground and above ground at various stages. And so it's also a way to protect secret teachings. Secret teachings, I call them secret teachings. They're not. These are teachings hidden in light, but they're hidden by light. And so that's why they're packed in symbols. And you may read the Emerald Tablet and go, oh my goodness, what a revelation. Or you may read it and go, what is this? I can't understand this at all. Like when I read the sutras of Patanjali, when I read the Yoga Sutras, at first I was following and going, oh yeah, I get this. I was a beginning yoga student. Oh sure, oh yeah. I got up to about Yoga Sutra. I got up to Patanjali Sutra number 30 or so. And then suddenly I was reading it. My jaw dropped. I was not comprehending a word I was reading. Not comprehending a word. So these things. But I just want you to park that somewhere, the Emerald Tablet of Thoth. And if you want to look up the background of Hermes Trismegistus, the source of that, because it's an important source of this text and the teachings that Tomberg's bringing forth here.
And Tomberg's appendix at the end of The Magician is probably one of the best and easiest introductions to the Emerald Tablet, I would think, isn't it?
Is it? Because I haven't read that, John. I haven't. I'm very bad.
It is no more dense than anywhere else in Tomberg. And I think with esoteric literature in general, it can be a lot worse.
Another text that I would offer you, there are two other texts that come directly from the Egyptian sources. One is through channeled means. The other one is through an anonymous means that I can't even tell you. But the one that I found very interesting is called Light on the Path. It's a very small tome by Mabel Collins, who was an English woman in the turn of the 20th century, early 20th century. She channeled this text. It's called Light on the Path. I have read it over and over again. I have found it to be the most beautiful, deep text. It's along the lines of St. John of the Cross's poem. Very, very dense, but beautiful. And it may speak to you. It may speak to you. Light on the Path, Mabel Collins, from about, I don't know, 1920 or something. The other book I would refer you to, which is much more about the principles, these ancient principles that come through the Corpus Hermeticum, is called the Kybalion. And that's Kybalion. that book came to me sort of the way the meditations came to Mark, the way he's describing that. I stumbled upon it. Someone actually kind of gave me this book. And it's written, the authorship is called Three Initiates. So that doesn't help you much. Three Initiates, the Kybalion. But it's a wonderful book explaining the metaphysical principles that underlie a lot of this book. So I would just give it to you as another added bibliography. It talks about the principle. It teaches you about the principles of vibration, the principles of cause and effect, the principles of recurrence. And these explain an awful lot of really deep ideas that will underlie this text also. They don't overlap completely, but there's quite a bit of overlap. And I offer these things only as tools that I found. And if they don't resonate with you, and if you go and look and see, not for me, light on the path, whatever, bunch of channeled bollocks. I don't care. I'm just offering it because it's stuff that I encountered on this as I was unwrapping this stuff. Yeah, and I think Mark he pointed to probably one of the most important paragraphs in this chapter, which is on page 8, the top of page 8. It sort of sums it up. Learn at first, concentration without effort. Transform work into play. Make every yoke that you have accepted easy, and every burden that you carry light. And of course, that's an echo of Jesus' teaching, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. He's unpacking that. That is a very good summation, I think, of the tools he's trying to offer you in the first chapter, first letter.
In this material, he refers to the magician as the one who dares, and that's the reason he's standing. And then that gives a segue to what's coming next, because the high priestess knows, and that's why she is seated. And the transformation from dare to know consists of that change of position from the standing to the seated.
Also notice where he puts the importance of silence. There's a esoteric maxim that says, dare to be silent. That's a very important statement, dare to be silent. Silence comes before gnosis. Silence is the ground out of which gnosis comes. The knowing that the Empress has is grounded in silence. So the magician is related profoundly to silence in some way. He's working in the field of silence. And silence is called holy. Silence is actually an embodiment of, I don't know, I'm going off the rails here. When you think of silence, what words come to you when you think of silence? It's very important that we establish this, of course. So I think of course, contemplation. I think of centering prayer. Sorry, Dora, you froze up.
I think of peace with silence.
though at the beginning, and I think probably for quite a long time, it is one thing to sit down and shut up, but then you get all the mental noises jabbering and chatting away. And so you're saying you think of peace in silence. I would say sometimes I think of noise. You know, how can I get rid of all this damn noise in my head? I doubt and I don't think that there's a magic way of getting rid of it. I think it is just a question of gently and persistently going there. And as he said, somewhere else in this chapter, to start off with, it'll only be for a few seconds, you find this rich, silent silence. And then it gets a little bit longer and a little bit longer and a little bit longer. But my word, that is not a quick fix thing. I love that story about Fred Astaire, and was it Julie Garland who was his partner in dancing? And she,
Ginger Rogers.
Ginger
Oh,
Rogers, yeah.
Ginger. Oh, thank you. Yes, I thought that didn't sound right. Well, she apparently said to him, "Oh, this part, it is so hard to be relaxed in it." And Fred Astaire said, "Yes, that means we just have to work an awful lot harder at it." And sometimes I find myself in that rather depressing situation here.
What else does silence conjure for you all? The concept of silence. Could you really define silence?
You could think of whether silence is silence in your own self or silence around you in your surroundings. And can you have one without the other? You know, can you find silence within yourself with there still being things in your surroundings that are going on? Or can you find silence in your environment, like if you're out in the woods, but it feels like silence, but if you really listened, you would still hear things, but it might very well feel like silence. So it can sort of manifest in different ways. And like John said, you might think of silence as meditating, but often there's other things going on that you can't, you're trying to get beyond that, but you're not. So I think it can manifest in a number of ways.
I think when I when I think about it really hard, silence is like freedom. Being free.
Are we connecting silence and peace? I don't know that they have to be connected. He makes the comment in this material about, and I'm going to read both parts of this, is it is necessary to be one in oneself. And he refers to that as concentration without effort. And one with the spiritual world, which he then describes as to have a zone of silence in the soul.
Where are you, Dory?
That could be page 11. It was about there.
It's about midway in page 11. I think,
Yeah.
for me, silence
Yeah.
denotes some sort of openness, maybe. I think that when I've experienced some sort of silence, I was in a state of reception, maybe, or open, a state of openness, ready to receive. Because otherwise, I seem to just get caught in an internal dialogue that could, go in circles forever. Might roll me backwards, maybe. But there's something about silence that to me denotes that my spirit is ready to receive something.
That's really helpful, because Tomberg says the zone of silence is not really about the soul being at rest, but rather being in contact with the spiritual world. So it is when we are actually able to be open to the spiritual world and to receive from it that perhaps things begin to move in an interesting way. So thank you very much, Mark, for actually helping me make that connection, which I think has been a very useful one.
Because it engenders the influx of forces. That's a powerful statement. And it's the foundation of all mysticism, gnosis, all magic. So it's a state of being, and he says foundation, which when he says foundation, to me, the word fountain comes to mind. That it's a fountain, a fount. It's a fount. It's a central fount of being. Silence is where the central fount of being manifests. I like the way Miller uses the word manifest. She's talking about a manifestation. And I think that's coming out of the ground of being. And that's where silence takes us, is to the source of manifestation, perhaps. But most importantly, us being in a state of receptivity to that. That is what silencing all the chatter is about. It's just clearing that space within ourselves to be receptive or reflective. We talked about the intellect being reflective, Dory, and what was the other part of that? The intellect is reflective, and action is that's the feminine aspect.
Yeah,
And then
well,
action,
love is what acts.
love, yeah. So reflection and action. But that's accessed through going to silence, to be receptive, to be open.
Well,
That's where action should spring from.
And he specifically says this transformation, the changing of work into play, is effected as a consequence of the presence of the zone of perpetual silence.
The zone of perpetual silence. That is wow. So like you said, Miller, like, is the silence outside of you? Is it within you? And this discernment about where silence is manifesting is the way that we're searching for that zone of perpetual silence. And once you find that, I think you can carry that within you and without you. We talk a lot about being free from the ego, and that being free from the ego is achieved through, freedom, because I'm going back to what Honey said about freedom. free from the ego. That you need to get past the chatter, past all that stuff, and get down to the substance below the ego. And this is what the magician, the magician has one hand facing the heaven, up to the heavens, and his other hand, does he have the wand? What does he have in the other hand? But it's pointing towards the ground. And he is a bridger of worlds. The magician is bridging the world of spirit and the world of manifestation on this plane. That's what we are. We are magicians. We are manifesting that bridge. We are creating the bridge. Through these exercises, through concentration, meditation, contemplation. So it's we build. The magician will be the first figure. The end of the tarot is the Fool. In other tarots, they put the Fool first. It's interesting that Tomberg puts the magician first, because in many tarot decks, the Fool is first. The Fool is represented by the number 0. So 0 can be placed either at the beginning or the end. It's an ambiguous position. But Tomberg has chosen to make the magician first, not the Fool, because the Fool is considered to be that character who is just starting out into the wheel of just descending from the world of spirit, coming in, a naive soul coming into the wheel of experience. But he's starting with the wheel of experience. He's starting with magician, who is already embedded in experience, in time, space, whatever you want to call it, the vertical, horizontal axis, whatever. He's starting. He's right there. There's no messing around with the Fool. And I think this is so interesting, and I'm still trying to figure this out about Tomberg, why he did this, but it doesn't really matter. This is the way he wants to teach. If you're studying with Lynn Bauman, John, the tarot with Lynn Bauman, are you going to be studying with him this weekend?
No, because I did the last one.
Oh, right, you're doing the last one. But he starts with the Fool as being the 0, the beginning, right? So don't be confused. Again, it's very easy to get confused with all these things. Like I said, I have 5 different tarot decks. I have a Kabbalistic deck. I've got the Aquarian deck. I've got the Alfred Waite deck. I didn't even realize that the Waite deck is considered part of the Golden Dawn. The Order of the Golden Dawn. That's the first deck I started with. And I find out, oh, that was with sort of like a pagan, or, that's sort of a pagan version. I don't know. It doesn't matter. I look at it, it's all fodder. It's all fodder for taking it in, just taking in these teachings.
Well, and the afterwards doesn't really even refer so much to the cards, what they call the spread of the cards. That the wandering gypsies are the ones that brought that.
That's a great thing, isn't it? It's the wandering gypsies that were carrying these symbols forward and keeping them hidden wrapped in little pieces of silk in their wagons. I love that. That's very mysterious and wonderful.
Well, it right now is just now 10 o'clock. It's been an hour. So we'll just move on next, and it will be in 2 weeks, Mark, to the High Priestess. And we'll have 2 weeks to chew on that and see what comes out.
Excellent. So
Mark, has this been helpful? You've been helpful to us. Have we been helpful to you?
Oh, I believe so. Yeah, I appreciate your welcome and just letting me jump in and just sit and chew on some of your thoughts. I think having a forum like this to kind of engage this material will be probably very helpful for me along the way. So I think that I'll set a reminder if you'll have me, and intend to dig into the High Priestess and see what that holds for us.
Yes. So in 2 weeks from today, we will resume and see what comes out.
I have to say thank you very much to all of you for being so brave as to encounter this text, because meditations on the Tarot groups are extremely rare. Extremely rare. And so this makes this a very special environment. And I know that the spirit of Tomberg will assist us. So with that, thank you so much. See you in a couple of weeks.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Alice.
Thank
Have a
you.
good couple of weeks. Thank you all.
See you now, guys, next week at the
Thank
moment.
you. Be
Yes.
well.
Yeah. And Alice, thank you for all of your background and really sharing with us.
Yes.
Sorry if I blathered on too much. I know I tend to. I'm trying to dare to be silent. It's my biggest challenge. Goodbye, you all.
Bye.
Bye-bye. God bless.